531. That is the number of Palestinian Arab villages that existed before 1948. Not estimates, not approximations. A recorded figure. 531 distinct locations mapped, named, and documented. Today, the majority of those locations no longer exist in their original form. Many were destroyed. Others were rebuilt over. Some were renamed, their original identities removed from official maps. This is not a story about motives or explanations. It is a story about scale. Before 1948, Palestine was a measurable landscape defined through census records, land surveys, and administrative maps. By 1946, approximately 1.3 million Palestinian Arabs lived across the territory. Alongside them were around 608,000 Jews. These figures were not speculative. They were compiled by the Anglo-American Committee, drawing from British Mandate data. Land ownership patterns reflected a similar structure. Palestinian Arabs held roughly 90% of the cultivated land, according to the Survey of Palestine, conducted between 1945 and 1946. Agriculture formed the backbone of the economy. Olive groves, citrus orchards, and grain fields spread across regions that had been cultivated for generations. The population was not dispersed randomly. It was organized into at least 531 Arab towns and villages, each one a fixed point on administrative maps. Beyond rural life, urban centers formed another layer of this landscape. Cities like Jaffa, Haifa, and Jerusalem contained a combined Arab population of approximately 250,000 people. These were economic hubs, ports, trade networks, and administrative centers connecting Palestine to the wider region. This is what the data shows before 1948, a populated, mapped, and functioning society. Now, we follow what happened to each of those 531 points. The villages were not abstractions. They were counted, categorized, and recorded with administrative precision. Across Palestine, these communities ranged in size from small rural settlements to large, densely populated towns. Some held only a few hundred people. Others stretched into the thousands. Together, they formed a continuous human landscape, not isolated pockets. They were also not evenly spread. In the north, the Galilee held the largest concentration, a dense cluster of villages, connected by agriculture and trade. Along the coast, districts like Haifa and Jaffa linked rural production to ports and urban markets. Around Jerusalem, villages formed a ring of communities feeding into a political and religious center. Further south, in the Negev, smaller populations adapted to harsher conditions, but remained part of the same mapped system. Most of these villages shared a similar economic structure. Agriculture dominated daily life. Olive trees, in particular, defined the landscape planted decades, sometimes centuries earlier. They were not short-term crops. They were long-term investments, tying families to land across generations. To understand how this looked on the ground, consider one village, Safaria, near Nazareth. It had schools, a mosque, and a market. Its presence was recorded repeatedly across Ottoman tax records and British censuses. It appeared again and again in official documents, not as a footnote, but as a stable, ongoing entry. Then, within a few years, it disappeared from those records as a populated place. Its land remained. Its people did not. Safaria is not an exception. It is one example among hundreds. The shift does not happen all at once. It unfolds in stages. At first, movement is limited, families leaving specific regions, often expecting to return. Then the pace accelerates. Entire cities begin to empty. Rural areas follow. By the end of the process, the scale becomes clear. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are no longer where the records had placed them, just months earlier. At the same time, the map itself begins to change. Villages that had appeared consistently in administrative data year after year start to vanish from updated records. Some are destroyed. Others are left standing but emptied. In many cases, what remains is not the community, but the land. When researchers later reconstructed the dataset, a pattern emerged. The majority of these villages were no longer intact. Only a small fraction remained with their original populations. The rest existed in altered forms or not at all. This was not only a demographic shift, it was a spatial one. Land that had been continuously cultivated and inhabited was reassigned, reclassified, and integrated into a different administrative system. The scale of that transfer is measurable, but more importantly, it is visible in what no longer appears on the map. The question of why this happened is debated. The question of whether it happened is not. The records align across multiple archives. This is not interpretation. It is documentation. A disappearance did not eliminate the population. It relocated it. What had once been a largely rural, locally anchored society became something else, a dispersed population, recorded under a new category, refugees. Over time, that number did not stabilize. It grew. Each generation remained within the same classification, expanding the total far beyond the original displacement. Today, that population spans multiple countries and territories, forming one of the largest and longest-standing refugee groups in modern records. But while the population expanded, the physical traces of the villages followed a different trajectory. In many locations, there is little left to indicate what once stood there. Some sites are now forests, planted after the villages were gone. Others have been built over new towns, new infrastructure, new names. In some cases, the only remaining evidence comes from archival maps, where coordinates still align with empty or transformed land. There are exceptions. Lifta, on the edge of Jerusalem, is one of them. Its stone houses still stand, uninhabited but intact. In a dataset of hundreds, it is a rare case where the physical structure remains visible. Not as a living village, but as a trace. 531 villages. That number remains fixed. It does not increase. It does not decrease. What changes is everything connected to it. A mapped landscape became a fragmented one. A population rooted in specific locations became dispersed across borders. And a set of recorded places became, in many cases, absent from the present. The data does not resolve this. It only preserves it, a number that still exists. Even where the places do not,